My teacher, my friend, my mentor. I met Yoel in Jerusalem. I don't remember how many years back.
I don't know, but we were back and forth writing long before then.
Yeah, and we have been friends for who knows
how many lifetimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
So, Yoel, really, we are so honored to have Yoel here tonight, really. Not only because it's polite to say so, because Yoel brings with him a wealth of wisdom and experience, not only in Hasidism and Kabbalah, but years of sitting with a Hindu teacher and travels in India, and deep ecumenical work with Christian friends, and knowledge of Buddhism and Sufism, and who knows what else. We'll discover it. So what comes to mind to me tonight is that there is a famous midrash from, I think, Midrash Genesis Rabbah.
Okay, we don't worry about sources here.
We don't worry, okay. That says that God holds 4 keys. Let's see if I remember them. The key to the grave, which is also the key to rebirth, the key to rain, the key to the womb, and the key to sustenance.
Yes,
Yeah?
that's the 4 keys.
That's the 4 keys. And I think maybe that you tonight are bringing us yet another key.
Amen.
Another key. A key to the heart.
Key to the temple of the heart.
Exactly. As a gate to having God's presence every moment in our life. Did you say
Yes,
so?
and this fits very nicely with another medrash, which says that when the temple, the Babylonians came into the temple, that the priest locked the gates of the inner sanctuary and threw the keys up in heaven, and a hand came and took it. You know, and that's the moment when the divine presence left Israel.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to find out the path that will bring the divine presence back into the world as a living presence that fills every moment of our lives. So I would really like to begin with a few moments of silence in order to, because these are words not just to hear, but words to really take into the heart. And in order to do that, we have to touch the place deep within our heart where the divine presence dwells. And from that place of calm and stillness, we can then really be open and receptive to the ideas and the words and the consciousness that I hope that we will share together. So let's begin first by just getting a comfortable position. Want me to put that over here? So get yourself a comfortable position and just relax the whole of your body, beginning with your head and shoulders and slowly working your way down to your toes. So all the strain and the stress and tension of the day is sort of washed away. And then begin to breathe in and out in a normal fashion, focusing your mind on the intake and the outflow of the breath. We know that in Hebrew the word neshima, means breath, is connected to the word neshama, which means soul. So with each breath we are drawing in the divine livingness inside us and arousing that infinite spark of God strolls in the core of our being. And as you breathe in and out, Let go of all other thoughts and feelings. Shut out all the clamor and noise from the outside world and from the thoughts running around your brain, the inner noise. And do that by just focusing on the breath. For this one moment, let nothing else exist. The movement of your breath. In and out, like a door opening and closing. Just the movement of that door. Everything else fades away. And feel the calm, the quiet, and the stillness as it envelops you, fills the whole of your mind. Let your consciousness dwell there, resting in the tranquility and peace. We're ready to begin. In the Torah, God commands the children of Israel, "Vasuli mikdash v'shochanti betocham." Let them make me a sanctuary, that I might dwell among them. The founder of Hasidism, the Baal Shem Tov, has a novel way of reading this biblical phrase. In this phrase, the Hebrew word for among them is betocham. The literal meaning of betocham is inside them. So the Baal Shem reads this verse as God commanding us each to create a place inside ourselves where God can dwell within us. A temple of the heart. So how do we build a sacred space inside ourselves where God can dwell? How do we transform ourselves into miniature living temples? Rabbi Shimon the Righteous states in Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, that the world stands on three things: Torah, Avodah, which means worship, and Gimilut Chasadim, which means acts of loving kindness. These three concepts are the rabbi's answer to this question. They are the pillars that uphold the temple of Rabbinic Judaism. The first pillar is Torah. For the rabbis, Torah means study. The rabbis saw study as as the central focus of all religious practice. All other dimensions of Judaism arose out of serious study. It was the path of study that led the rabbis to the experience of sublime spiritual joy. Avodah, worship, is the second pillar. For the rabbi, avodah meant prayer. They called prayer avodah shebalev, worship of the heart. Prayer takes the place of the worship in the temple. The words of prayer build a bridge between God and humankind. The third pillar, gimilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness, means good works in rabbinic Judaism. They believe that man is not an impartial observer in God's creation. He is an active partner in bringing the divine presence into the world. Acts of chesed, loving kindness, play a crucial role in instilling the precious virtues of love and compassion into the hearts and minds of humankind. The combined practice of these three principles brought balance and harmony and firmness to the world of the rabbis. Through the practice of these three spiritual pillars, the rabbis transformed themselves into living temples to hold the divine presence. These three pillars are akin to the three paths in yoga: jnana, bhakti, and karma yoga. Torah, study, is the equivalent of jnana. It is the path of the mind. Avodah, worship, is the equivalent of bhakti. It is the path of the heart. Gimilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness, is the equivalent of karma, the path of the hands and feet, the path of action. Though everyone follows all three of these paths, we each at the same time have one path that comes more easily to us, one path that is our natural way of going towards God, one path that resonates with our soul. Therefore, some of us are lovers of the path of study, and others are devotees of the path of devotion, and still others are the followers, believers in the path of action. We each need all three paths to have a complete spiritual life. These three pillars can also be defined in yet another way that reflects the concepts of modern spirituality. Torah, avodah, and gimilut chasadim can be equated with the expansion of our consciousness, the constant remembrance of God, and the inner work of self-transformation. These three principles are loosely defined as follows. Expansion of our consciousness, or Torah, encompasses all efforts to expand the boundaries of both our inner and our outer reality. The 16th century Kabbalist Rabbi Isaac Luria, one commonly known as the Ari, teaches that there is a supernal Torah in the heavens which is infinite and eternal. This Torah holds all knowledge and all truth. The Torah that we have in this world is merely a contracted version of the supernal Torah. Our task in this life, the Hasidic master Dov Ber Mezovich tells us, is to regain the light and the consciousness of this higher Torah. We do this by expanding our consciousness out towards the infinite awareness of the supernal Torah. Remembrance of God, or avodah, includes all practices to help bring the awareness of God into every moment of our life. In Judaism, nothing is left out of the realm of holiness. The presence of God is brought into every experience of our earthly existence. Through prayer, blessing, and ritual, we strive to sanctify every moment of our life, from birth until death. This constant remembrance of God lies at the heart of the path of avodah, the path of worship, or devotion. Self-transformation, gimilut chasadim, embodies all attempts to transform ourselves from animal creatures into divine instruments, from what we are to what God wants us to be. Thank you. L'chaim. Melech haolam. Shehakol nihiyeh bidvaro.
Amen.
Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, Master of the universe, who has created all things with his word.
Amen.
Sorry, got to get it back. So 12th transformation is Gemilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. Because these acts of loving kindness are essential not only for the person in need, but also the person who is doing the act of chesed. The rabbis tell us that when we perform an act of charity, the person who gives the charity gets a greater blessing than the person who receives it. This is because the one who gives the charity is given an opportunity to purify and uplift his own nature. It provides him with an opportunity to awaken the divine spark within him. Gemilut Chasadim, therefore, is ultimately about self-transformation. It is about transforming ourselves into fitting instruments to transform and uplift the whole of this world. So let us take a deeper look at each of these three concepts and see how they can help us to transform ourselves into living temples where God can dwell. The first of the pillars is the continual expansion of our consciousness. Swami Ashokananda, the head of the Vedanta Society of San Francisco for over 40 years, once recounted to one of his devotees the following personal reminiscence about an experience that he had on the beach in Madrasa, it's now called Chennai. Quote, "Once, as I stood on the beach, suddenly my mind opened up and ideas began to come like lightning. They were ideas I have never had before, had never read anywhere, completely new and original ideas. They were of another order than the ideas one usually has, an entirely different order. They were not related to anything on this plane of thought. Made me think that there is a vast thought world and that our minds are only on the fringe of it." End of quote. We live in a material world and are locked into a physical state of consciousness. We see and understand but a tiny fraction of the greater reality which underlies the outer facade which we can see, hear, and touch with our hands. The purpose of religion is to lift us out of the narrow confines of this physical consciousness, to expand our horizons and make us receptive to a broader picture, to attune us with ideas and perspectives that are beyond the normal realm of thought. The expansion of our consciousness changes the way in which we experience the world around us. This, in turn, transforms the way in which we view ourselves. It is through the expansion of our consciousness that we break down the old conceptions and beliefs that lock us into unproductive ways of thinking and behaving. And it is through the energy of the will of God that is embodied in this consciousness that we find the courage and the strength to set out on new and uncharted directions in our life. There are many incidents in the Torah that underline the importance of an expansive state of consciousness. One such incident is the story of the 12 spies that journeyed into the land of Israel. After the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, Moses and the children of Israel traveled on through the desert until they reached the borders of the land of Israel. Before they set out on the war of conquest, Moses decided to send a group of spies to scout out the land. He picked the princes of the 12 tribes for this important mission. 12 spies entered into the land and wandered through its hills and valleys for 40 days. When they returned from their mission, the princes were devastated. What they saw in Canaan completely destroyed any confidence they had the children of Israel could conquer the promised land. We're not able to go up against these people, they said, for they are stronger than we. The land that we have gone to spy out is a land that eats up its inhabitants. And all the people that we saw in it were men of great stature. We were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight as well. As a result of this report, the people lost heart and rebelled against God and Moses. They refused to enter the land of Canaan and discussed choosing a leader and returning to the land of Egypt. When God heard their laments, he called Moses and told him that he was going to destroy the people of Israel and start a new nation, beginning with him. But Moses pleaded for the life of the people, and God relented and agreed not to destroy them. However, he said that he would not allow them to enter into the promised land. He condemned them instead to 40 years of wandering in the desert, until the generation of the Exodus had died out, and a new generation had arisen in its place. This generation, who were not part of this rebellion, would then be taken into the promised land. Now, if we take a careful look at the story of the spies, I think we will see that their mission failed not because of a lack of courage, but rather because of a lack of vision, a fundamental inability to see the divine opportunity that was embodied in the land before them. The failure of the spies was ultimately a failure to leave behind the narrow consciousness of Egypt and enter into the expanded consciousness of the land of Israel. This truth is expressed for us in the Torah by the name that is given in Hebrew for Egypt, which is Mitzrayim. This word can also be read as Meitzarim, which means the narrow places. It was the limited slave mentality of Egypt that had led the children of Israel to build the golden calf. Now it bound them to material consciousness once again in the episode of the spies. Once it was clear that the people could not hold on to the higher state of living by divine inspiration, that God simply had no choice but to force them back into the desert. After this generation of slaves had passed away, the work could begin again, with a new generation that was better prepared to live with God in his land. At the end of the Torah portion that tells us the story of the spies, God gives the children of Israel the commandment of tzitzit, to place a fringe on the four corners. Our mind is lifted through a series of images that expands our awareness towards the infinite. This is why the commandment of tzitzit comes at the end of the Torah portion about the spies, because the tzitzit are a remedy for their failure of vision. So I would now like to do a visualization meditation together with you to demonstrate how to use the Talmudic passage above I've just quoted to expand our consciousness. Before I begin, we'll pass this bit of blue thread around the room. As many of you may know, normally we no longer have the blue thread on the tzitzit, they're just white threads. It's because after the time of the rabbis, about 1,000 years ago, the knowledge of the exact dye to be used was lost. They just didn't know what color it was or where to get the dye. Then about 150 years ago, a Hasidic rabbi from Poland, Rabbi Gershon Chanuch Lehner of Adzin, did intensive research looking for the source of the techelet, this color blue. And he discovered a snail that lives off the Mediterranean coast near Italy that was used for this dye. He analyzed the sources and found the snail again. And since that time, there has been a small circle of people which is continually growing that have produced the dye for the techelet and have added a blue thread to their tzitzit. So in order to really get a feeling for the color, not a tzitzit, but the whole of that dye, so you should get a sense of the dye, the whole of 4 threads together. So have a look, because this is going to be the beginning point of our meditation, is meditating upon this beautiful color blue. And once you've looked at the tzitzit, at the techelet, then you can begin to get comfortable again and try to relax once again the mind and the body as we prepare ourselves to again look inward and tap that inner space within. And it's amazing, actually, more and more as you wander around Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, and different parts of Israel, you'll see young men with their tzitzit and with their talis who have that blue thread. And it's amazing how it will change the whole feeling of the talit. Suddenly the whole thing comes alive. And you understand how this could be a spiritual tool and not just funny fringes on the end of your garment. And you understand why the rabbis, why God, gave us this commandment in the first place. So we all can now start getting ready. Thank you. And once again, just relax every part of your body, letting go of all the tension, beginning with the head and shoulders, moving down all the way to the toes, just settling the mind, settling the body, settling the heart in that space of quiet and stillness. And now visualize the blue of the chelet, of the techelet in your mind, and feel its calm and relaxing quality. As you feel that calm pervade your consciousness, let all the strain just be washed away. Now visualize the clear blue waters of the sea or ocean. Let your mind take you there. Hear the sound of the waves as they break against the seashore. Stare out into the distant horizon where the water meets the sky. Now visualize the great expanses of a clear blue sky on a cloudless day. Let it stretch out in all directions. Feel the sense of vastness and freedom in that great open space. Next, move on to the image of the sapphire stone. Regarding the sapphire stone, we are told in the Torah that not long after the revelation at Sinai, Moses returned to the mountain together with his brother Aaron and the 70 elders of Israel. Together they climbed partly way up the mountain, where the Torah tells us, beheld the God of Israel, and under his feet was a paved work of sapphire stone. This wall of sapphire is a region of brilliant blue light that lies at the limit of our consciousness. It is the place where heaven meets earth. Visualize this great vastness. See its resplendent color. Feel the wonderful clarity and the immense expanse which is here. Now finally cross over the wall of sapphire and enter into the realm of the kingdom of heaven and the throne of glory. Hear the voices of the angels as they sing out the praise of the Lord. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai Tzevaot, Melo Kol Haaretz, Kvodo. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole universe is filled with his glory. Feel the power of the divine presence around you. Feel the tremendous light and love that is radiating everywhere. Try to let go of your individual boundaries and transcend physical awareness and touch the realm of the infinite and the eternal. Now let go of all images and rest quietly in the silence. And finally, slowly open up your eyes. So this is the first key tool in building the temple of the heart, the expansion of our consciousness. The process of continually expanding our consciousness will ultimately lead us to the recognition of the underlying unity of all religions and peoples. This understanding will be not just an intellectual knowledge, but a sublime state of consciousness that links us into the place in the mind of God that is beyond all race and beyond all religion, the place where everything is one. Father Thomas Merton beautifully portrays for us the nature of this experience in the following description of a sudden spiritual waking that occurred while he was walking down a busy street in Louisville, Kentucky. I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers. Then it was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depth of their hearts where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, the core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. If only they could all see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time. The center of our being is a point of nothingness, which is untouched by sin and by illusion, a point of pure truth, a point, a spark, which belongs entirely to God. It is like a pure diamond, blazing with the invisible light of heaven. It is in everybody. And if we could see it, we would see the billions of points of light coming together into the face and blaze of a sun that would make all the darkness and cruelty of life vanish completely. The gate of heaven is everywhere. It is union with this place of consciousness that is the supreme goal of our life, and is the revelation of this truth that is the essential purpose behind all of the world's many religions and faiths. I would now like to move on to the second pillar, the constant remembrance of God. The Psalms proclaim, Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, I have set the Lord before me at all times. The Quran declares, remember me, and I shall remember you. The Bhagavad Gita exclaims, fix your mind on me alone, let your thoughts dwell in me. You will hereafter live in me alone. The constant remembrance of God is central to the spiritual life. It is a task at the same time, which is very hard to fulfill. It is not easy to find the right balance between our relationship with God and our relationship with the world. It is difficult to live ordinary lives and also sanctify our existence. It is a real challenge to be both in the world and also make God a living presence in our life. when the devotees asked Sri Ramakrishna, the 19th century Hindu saint, how to keep their mind on God while going about their worldly duties, he replied, "A maid servant in the house of a rich man performs all the household duties, but her thoughts are fixed on her home in her native village. She brings up her master's children as if they were her own. She even speaks of them as my Rama and my Hari, but in her own mind she knows very well that they don't belong to her at all. The tortoise moves about in the water, but can you guess where her thoughts are? They're on the bank where her eggs are lying. Do all your duties in the world, but keep your mind on God." In the busy world of modern society, it is difficult to find the time to turn our minds towards God. But even just a few moments of God remembrance at regular intervals during the day can make a tangible difference and bring lasting benefits. These meditative pauses empower us to work from a different place within ourselves. They enable us to watch events as a witness and an observer. They detach us from the emotional whirlwind of the moment and teach us to stop and reflect before we act, react, and interact. The Sufi master Jalaluddin Rumi taught, "Never be without the remembrance of him, for his remembrance gives strength and wings to the bird of the spirit." The bird of our spirit is under constant assault every single day. In our homes, in our workplaces, in fact, wherever we go, there are thoughts and emotions that fill the air with their energy. Each time we enter into another space, we are impacted by its energy field and unconsciously respond to it. These energy impacts affect our own state of consciousness and shift our mood and state of mind. Through the constant remembrance of God, by regularly tuning inward, we can break the effect of these energy fields upon us and lift ourselves into a higher state of consciousness, where the bird of the spirit can freely soar. Through the constant maintenance of this practice, we build a strong personal vibration that will naturally counter the effects of other energies. As the purity and power of our energy vibration intensifies, we will gradually be transformed from passive recipients of the emanations of others into an active, positive influence on any environment that we enter. Yet the practice of the remembrance of God is about more than trying to protect our state of consciousness. It's a continual reminder to ask ourselves who it is that we are and what it is that we are doing in this world. It is a wake-up call out of the abyss of unconsciousness in which most of us live. It is a flash from the higher worlds that comes to shatter the numbing effect of daily habit and routine. So how do we go about achieving this goal of constant God remembrance? How do we train our fickle and restless mind to focus on God? The power of the practice of the remembrance of God does not come from engaging in elaborate intellectual contemplation. The practice of the remembrance of God makes use of simple techniques of repetition and awareness. Through constant practice, these techniques slowly carve a new groove into the record of our consciousness. By continually drawing our mind back to God, or performing our mundane daily activities, resting in God gradually and slowly becomes our natural mode of living in the world. The Hasidic text, Likutei Ranal, compares the practice of the constant remembrance of God to a person who is carrying a precious gem in his pocket as he goes about town taking care of his affairs. No matter what else he may be doing, during the day, one part of his mind is always on the stone to make sure he never loses it. Doesn't make any difference whether he's walking along the street or arguing with a client or going through the marketplace to make purchases or simply relaxing and eating his lunch. Throughout all of these activities, he will never lose his awareness of the presence of the stone. So we must be with the thought of God. The thought of God is the precious stone that we hold in our pocket. But never letting go of this thought, protect the precious jewel, which is our awareness of the Lord. Visualizations are a powerful technique that can help us in this practice. In the Hasidic text, Or HaGanuz, it suggests that as we go about our daily lives, rather than simply thinking of our body as a mundane physical entity, we can think of it as holy ground that carries the light and the consciousness of our soul. We can visualize that our body is the support for the whole expanse of our soul that stretches way up into the heavens. And it is the vehicle for the emanation of all the heavenly energies from the Sfirot, for the divine presence to flow down into the world. In Mishnat Chasidim, another text, it suggests that we imagine that the light of the Shekhinah is resting above our head and radiating out from there in all directions. We can imagine then that we are sitting in the midst of this beatific light and in the midst of everything that we do in our day, and it's just radiating from us as we take care of all our needs. If this approach doesn't work, there's another, perhaps more personal approach we can try. In this approach, you imagine a great soul that you have great love and reverence for. Imagine like Moses, the Buddha, the Krishna, Saint Francis, Baal Shem Tov. And imagine that they are there beside you, watching everything that you do, listening to your every word, even able to tap into your every thought. This certainly would make us strive a lot harder to be aware of what we're doing, to be mindful of our thought, words, and deeds. In fact, I would say that it would be an extraordinary way for us to live our lives. It would create a very intense and deep and profound revolution in the way we experienced reality. So on one level, the practice of the constant remembrance of God is about reprogramming our computer so that we are tuned to matters of the spirit. On another level, the constant remembrance of God lifts us into a completely different state of awareness, changes our angle of vision. It attunes our whole being to a different frequency. It clears away the material veil that covers our consciousness, so that we perceive the divine light that shines within every human being. The Sufi master Abdul Qadir Jilani exhorted his devotees, "Your heart is a polished mirror. You must wipe it clean of the veil of dust which is gathered upon it, because it is destined to reflect the light of divine secrets." What the Sufis call zikr, and what we are calling the constant remembrance of God, is the means by which we polish the mirror of the heart. The constant remembrance of God polishes the surface of this inner mirror until it perfectly reflects the divine image in which we were created. So this is the remembrance of God, the second of the three pillars for the temple of the heart. So let us now move on to the last of the three pillars, the work of self-transformation. This work takes place on two levels. through the practice of daily disciplines and the development of divine virtues. The practice of daily disciplines is the foundation of all spiritual work. Every religion has a framework of disciplines that teach us how to live our lives. The purpose of all spiritual disciplines is to establish the supremacy of mind over matter. These disciplines force us to overcome the natural limitations of the physical body. They help us to control our thought, speech, and action. They push us to use our mind and willpower to control the body's workings. They harness the power of the soul and transform us into masters of our physical self. The work of controlling the animal nature is a lifelong battle. All the great teachers of humankind have made clear to us the negative qualities we need to overcome: anger, hate, jealousy, greed, uncontrolled lust, and arrogance. These imperfections are present in each of us in varying degrees. Where one person discovers his strength, another will find his weaknesses. Yet none can escape from the need to do this work. All the different religious traditions provide us with the tools for accomplishing this spiritual task. The meaning suggested by each reflects the particular worldview that they hold. Their effectiveness comes from the combination of heart, soul, and mind power that is infused into each method. If we join these disciplines to our own will and love, then our efforts will bear fruit. Through the daily work of spiritual disciplines, we can slowly refine our imperfections. Gradually, through constant and persistent effort, the dross within us is cleared away, till after many years of toil, our personality will be transformed into a pure vessel that is fit to hold the divine light. The struggle to control our lower nature played a central role in the life of the early Christian desert fathers. Here are a couple of stories from the lives of the fathers, give us a glimpse into their approach to this spiritual work. One day, the brothers praised a monk before Abba Anthony. When the monk came to see him, Anthony wanted to know how he would bear insults. And seeing that he could not bear them at all, he said to him, "You are like a village magnificently decorated on the outside, but destroyed from within by robbers." A story is told about Abba John, that he prayed to God to take his passions away from him so that he might become free from care. He went and told one of the elders of the Christian fathers about his prayer. He said, "I find myself in peace as a result, without any enemy." The elder immediately turned to him and said, "Go beseech God to stir up warfare, that you may regain the affliction and humility that you used to have. For it is by warfare that the soul makes progress." So he besought God, and when warfare came, he no longer prayed that it might be taken away, but said, "Lord, give me strength for the fight." In Islam, this inner struggle is called the Greater Jihad. According to the tradition, when Muhammad returned from one of his battles, he said, "You have arrived with an excellent arrival. You have come from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad, the striving of a servant of Allah against his desires." The Sufi mystic Muhammad Rahim Bawa Mohayyadin, and I hope I pronounced it right, elucidates the saying in this following manner. True jihad, he said, is to praise God and cut away the inner satanic enemies. When wisdom and clarity come to us, we'll understand that the enemies of truth are within our own hearts. There are 400 trillion, 10,000 spiritual opponents within the body. Satan and his qualities of backbiting, deceit, jealousy, envy, treachery, falsehood, arrogance, karma, illusion, mantras, and magic, and the desire for earth, sensual pleasures, and gold. These are the enemies which separate us from Allah, from truth, from worship, from good actions and good thoughts, and from faith, certitude, and determination. These are the enemies which create divisions among the children of Adam and prevent us from attaining a state of peace. The struggle against the instincts of the lower self, however, is only part of the work of self-transformation. We also need to strive to incorporate the divine attributes into our heart and mind. In the Torah it is written, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." The rabbis tell us we make ourselves holy by emulating the divine behavior. God is compassionate, so we should become passionate. God is generous, so we too should be generous. And in this way, we also will become holy. The Baal Shem Tov believed that God commanded us to be holy not only because it would benefit ourselves, but also because it would be of service to the rest of creation. The Kabbalah teaches that there is a pattern that runs through the universe and that forms the spiritual backbone for everything that is. This pattern is the 10 Sfirot, or heavenly spheres. They are the primal expression of the divine essence, and they manifest in the universe as 10 divine attributes. The rabbis also teach that man in himself is a small world or universe. The Baal Shem therefore interprets to mean that just as the 10 attributes form the fundamental pattern of the universe, so these 10 attributes form the foundation of the little universe, which is a human being. When we awaken a divine attribute within ourselves, we are drawing on the energy of this attribute from its source in the world of the Sfirot, which then flows down into our hearts, and from there, out into the world. How do we develop these divine attributes? How do we actualize the divine potential that lies hidden within ourselves? I'd like to take a closer look at the development of one of these attributes in order to get an idea of how this process works, the attribute of compassion. What is compassion? I think that compassion is an ability to identify with the suffering of others. More than this, it is an instinctual reaction to rush in and help wherever we see pain and sorrow. A powerful pull that draws us with it to where there is a need and compels us to do something about it. Compassion is linked to wisdom. This is because compassion comes from an understanding of the suffering of this world. But it cannot be just intellectual knowledge. It must be an experiential awareness of how hard life can be. Compassion is predicated on a love that is born out of a sharing of humankind's woes. The loss of a loved one, a serious illness, a financial catastrophe, the destruction of a war or a natural disaster. Any of these tragic events will shatter the calm of our reality. They will force us to reassess the meaning of our lives and push us to reconsider our values and our priorities. We are shocked out of our self-absorption and brought into a world where the needs of others take precedence over the needs of our own self. What happens when you use a stool?
We have compassion for it.
So I would like to suggest that perhaps this is why compassion is so essential to Judaism. For the Jewish people have suffered and witnessed a great deal of sorrow and pain and loss over the millennia. And that has taught us to feel compassion for others. And it woke in us a desire to bring compassion into the world. This desire for compassion is embodied no more powerfully in any place in the tradition than a prayer that's called the 13 Attributes of Compassion. When Moses goes up the mountain for a second time to meet God, he asks the Lord to show him his glory. God replies that Moses cannot see his face, but that he will show him his back. Then Moses hides in the cleft of a rock as God passes all of his glory over him. The power of God's presence sends Moses into ecstatic state, and he exclaims, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, Av Chesed v'Emet, Notzer Chesed la'alafim, Notzer Avon v'Fesher v'Chata v'Nakeh. Lord, Lord, compassionate Lord, gracious, long-suffering, abundant in love and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and he cleanses. In this moment, Moses touches upon the essential nature of the God of Israel, and what he discovers is infinite compassion. In the book of the Zohar, the central text of Jewish mysticism, we are told that there are heavenly hosts of compassion in the world of the souls that are waiting for our cry to come and help us. Wherever there is a true plea for God, these souls come pouring in to bring God's love and compassion into the world. They are described as 13 well springs of oil that radiate compassion into all the worlds. These 13 well springs of compassion correspond to the 13 attributes of compassion in the prayer of Moses on Mount Sinai. We can think of these heavenly hosts as a great gathering of souls. We can simply think of them as a symbol of the great force of goodness in the universe, to which we have given the name of God. Whenever we act with compassion, we draw on this transcendent source of strength and harness its power. In one of his teachings, the Hasidic master Dov Ber Meserich describes the experience of walking amid the supernal pipelines of energy that emanate out from the Sfirot in the higher worlds. I prefer to think of these emanations not as pipelines, but as a massive web of energy and light. When we join ourselves to the heavenly hosts of compassion, we become transformed from solitary, isolated individuals into members of an immense network of energy and consciousness and light that emanates out from God in the Absolute and flows down through all of the worlds. I would now like to do another short meditation together in order to give you an idea of how this process works. So one more time, close your eyes and let go of all tension in your body. Relax every part of you, from your head down to your toes, releasing all of the strain and the tension. and filling yourself instead with peace and calm and stillness. Now begin to breathe in and out in a normal fashion, focusing your mind on the intake and the outflow of the breath. Nothing else occupy your thoughts. Let no other sound disturb you. For this one moment, the only thing that exists is the inward flow and the outward exhalation of the breath. Now visualize that the light of your own soul is shining down upon you from above. Feel the power of its radiance. Feel the love and the beauty of its presence. Now think of all the people that you know who are in need of compassion. All the people who are suffering and in pain. Try to visualize their faces in your mind. Now standing in the clear light of your soul, look towards God and with a sincere and open heart ask Him or her to relieve all of this terrible suffering. As you turn towards God, repeat this short prayer with me. Adonai Rachem, Adonai Rachem. Lord, have compassion. Lord, have compassion. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Adonai Rachem. Adonai Rachem. Lord, have compassion. Lord, have compassion. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison. Adonai rachem. Adonai rachem. Adonai rachem. Adonai rachem. Now visualize in your mind the great heavenly hosts of compassion, whose presence permeates all of the world. Visualize the great web of light and consciousness that they form in the heavens. Let this web of light expand out in all directions until it fills the whole of your consciousness, the whole of your mind. Now repeat the words of the 13 attributes of compassion from the prayer of Moses on Sinai, and strive to merge your heart, mind, and soul with this great network of love, light, and compassion in the higher world. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, Rav Chesed ve'emet, Notzer Chesed la'alafim, Notzer Avon ve'fesha ve'chata ve'na'akeh. Lord, Lord, compassionate Lord, gracious, long-suffering, abundant in love and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and he or she cleansed. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, Rav Chesed ve'emet, Notzer Chesed la'alafim, Notzer Avon ve'fesha ve'chata ve'na'akeh. Now let all of the images dissolve away and rest in the silence and the peace and the compassion. I'll slowly open up your eyes. The purpose of this life is for us to evolve as human beings, to express fully in ourselves the divine image in which we have been created. The goal of our evolution is for humanity to embody the great goodness that is of God's essence. This divine life force flows eternally from God into the world. This outpouring of essential goodness is the foundation upon which all of the worlds exist. All other qualities and virtues enter into our physical plane of consciousness upon the stream of energy coming from God in the Absolute. This stream of energy is a tremendous spiritual force that can transform our world. Torah, or the expansion of our consciousness, avodah, or the practice of the constant remembrance of God, and gemilut chasadim, the inner work of self-transformation, are the tools which enable us to harness this great spiritual force. These three forces, these three concepts, form the foundation for our personal spiritual evolution. They are the pillars of the temple of the heart. Our own personal evolution plays a role in the spiritual evolution and uplift of the entire world. It is part of a much larger process that is slowly and gradually transforming the very nature of our planet. Sometimes painfully slow, imperceptibly so, but it is happening all of the time. In every instance when we move a step forward in our own life, we are bringing one more spark of divine energy and consciousness into this material reality. In this way, we continually infuse this physical plane with God's eternal light. One day, the whole of our planet will be permeated with divine consciousness. One day, even though it may take several thousand years, but it will come, this entire world will become a living temple that holds the infinite love, wisdom, and compassion of the one eternal Lord.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Any questions, or simply thoughts and comments to share? Now you'll have to wait a minute to ask. Yes, please.
So I greatly appreciate everything that you've given us. Especially appreciate the Adonai Rachem. This occurred to me as you spoke that in a time, in a situation, when my tendency would be to react to a situation and not to remember that the person in front of me is a part of me and all that is, that it seems we've been exhorted a lot to be compassionate, and sometimes I just can't work it up. But when you said Adonai Rachem, not that I haven't heard it before, but somehow the way that you spoke it, it's like a mantra I could use in that situation where I'm faced with someone to whom my feeling is to,
knock him off his feet.
Yeah, right. That somehow there's something so beautiful about it not being completely up to me to move myself to a compassionate state. So Adonai Rachem says, I allow you, God, to, through me, be compassionate to this, and to please carry me along into that so that we have the same thing. So I greatly appreciate that. I find that a real gift.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a wonderful way of using it. I would add that, in essence, the whole purpose of this meditation is to draw that reservoir of compassion that's in the heavens. That all the people that have felt compassion for thousands of years, it didn't just disappear, it's stored. And we can access that reservoir of infinite compassion, which takes us up to the infinite compassion, which is of God's essence. And that way, we can bring it through us into the world. So asking God to help us to bring His compassion into the world by bringing His compassion into us so that we can bring it to others. The Maggid of Mezrich, again, who was the successor of the Baal Shem, also says, how do you put out a fire? Or how do you get honey from, got the teaching wrong, how do you get honey from a hive? It says, you bring smoke, and then the bees all run away. So he says, what do you do when someone's filled with anger? When you're filled with anger? He says, if you bring in love, the anger simply cannot stay. You speak in the savory smoke of the offering to God, of love and compassion. You simply cannot feel love and anger at the same time. So you draw that into you, and that breaks the anger and breaks the irritation. And even if it just does it for a moment, it's enough to change the balance of your inner state. And then you can be open to truly, perhaps, feeling that compassion and expressing it in your life. Next question.
When you were talking about the second pillar, and you were saying that there was a core that was even deeper than your heart.
Yes.
That's revolutionary to me. I'd never. Because that I don't know, that brings it to a place because of, I don't know.
So let me answer. Yeah. Bring me back. So, Ramana Maharshi, is a famous Indian saint, used to tell his people to meditate on the heart. And one day, one of the devotees asked him, do you mean the physical heart? He says, I don't mean the physical heart. We call it the heart because you need somewhere to concentrate on, but that's just a physical muscle. There's a place at the core of us, which is our spiritual heart. And that spiritual heart is what I'm talking about. That's the very depth of our being. And there's really a place inside each of us where we can access that which is infinite and eternal. We often say that and in the Kabbalah it says that each person has a spark of God within them. And we all go, yes, it's perfectly normal, but nobody really thinks what it means. We each have a spark of God within us. And that means that there's a place within us where we can access the absolute, where we can know the unknowable, where we can touch that which is infinite and eternal. So when I talk about going to the core, I'm talking about heart that we normally think about is still an aspect of emotion, which is part of our physical reality. This is about going beyond that, using that as a way of making a bridge to that which is called unknowable and absolute. And that's what I mean about going to the core. And when you touch that place, then you go into a place that's indescribable, that's calm and still and infinite, and of no quality in particular, but every quality at once.
Yeah. And deeper than religion.
And deeper than any particular outer form.
Because I find
it's at the core of all religions.
Right. So that's the common
And
place.
each religion is a particular path to take us to that place. You know, same way each of us have different kinds of food which we like. If we all ate the same thing, it'd be a very boring world. And each of us looks different. Each of us has different metabolisms. And in the same way, we each have different needs and different paths for going towards God. And God created different paths. And even within each path, right? The minute there's a religion, then there's 25 different forms of it. Because there's so many different kinds of people.
Well, and separation, that's what I've been thinking about. How do you get beyond the separations that are religion to what's common, that core?
Well, I think that, we used to talk about universality simply, and now we talk about unity and diversity. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, each of us has that place that's our home, our spiritual home, whatever religion we either grew up in or feel drawn towards. But from that place, we feel a kinship and an appreciation for the beauty and the wisdom in all the other religions. It's like, this is my home and I invite you to come be in my home. And I go to visit your home. Mm-hmm. And that's the way God needs and wants it to be at this point in humanity's evolution. Because, quite frankly, if we don't figure a way to live together and stop killing each other, then we simply aren't going to survive. And religion for too long has been a vehicle for division and for hate. It has to become a vehicle for unity and love and acceptance of one another. And then we'll really be able to touch that place. And the easiest way, so to speak, the easiest and the hardest of arriving at that place is to experience that inner place of oneness. Because once you really know and experience in the depth of your heart that all humankind is one, that all living things are one, it changes the whole way you feel. And you never can, in the same way, disregard or hate or show a lack of care for another human being. You may not always stay in that place, but at least something of it remains part of everything you do and say.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah. That's the goal. And all these building the temple is to make us capable of holding that presence. After all, God is infinite and infinite in all his love. He embraces everything and everyone. So if we want to be like God, if we want to be one with God, we have to become infinite like him in all embracing in our love. Yes?
So what's your relationship to despair?
To this?
Despair.
Despair.
It's very easy to be despaired, to what's going on in the world.
I think that, to be honest, there's obviously a lot of suffering, a lot of killing, a lot of hate, the things we're doing to the planet. There's so much that one can despair of. But then I think that on one level, a lot of the cause of this despair, the deep depth of despair, is the narrow vision that we have. Think of how long we've been really consciously trying to live, with awareness and creating societies. Whatever our problems, think of where we've come in 10,000 years. Part of the reason we have so much despair is because we're so much more aware of things we never knew about, or thought about, or cared about. Who knew what was going on the other end of the planet? Who understood our relationship with the rest of the world in this intimate way? It's only as we understand and perceive and can communicate with each other in this broader way that we have this changed awareness. But at the same time that we have this changed awareness, there also is so much incredible good that's taking place in the world at the same time. Yes, it's sometimes pathetic, and yes, often it's even misguided. But think of all the organizations around the world that respond to suffering and sorrow wherever they see it. That such a thing never existed before. Who heard of people in the one end of the world responding to a tragedy at the other end of the world? For people they know nothing about, have no connection to, and it matters in no way to their lives. It's an incredible thing. Think about the fact that there's people, all of us in this room, that appreciate religions from different traditions and cultures all around the world, where 2,000, 3,000 years ago we didn't even know they existed. What a broadening of our consciousness that's been. And think of all the efforts that are being made all around the world by different people and groups and associations and schools to try and awaken that awareness and teach people how to live and work together. It's an amazing thing that's never been before. So we have enormous possibility, which is reason for hope. And if we follow some of the guidelines that we know about, then we can actualize all of this potential and hope and turn it into reality. 10,000 years to get here, give us another 10,000 years, who knows where we'll be. We just have no patience, We think, well, if the next 10 years we don't solve it all, it's all going to blow up. That's where faith does come in. We have to do everything that we possibly can to tend and care for God's garden. At the same time, we have to have faith that it's God's garden, and He or she, or both, will help us keep things going, find our way. And that's where the hope lies, within each of us, the part of God within each of us. The more we can access that, the more we can bring hope into the world and hope into our lives. So my relationship with despair is to respond with hope, and respond with trying to go to that place of oneness and calm and stillness within. Or simply to try and do something positive, anything, as my response. Get up and do something. Something as simple as signing a petition on the internet, or simple as going over and saying how you're feeling to your neighbor. Or letting somebody in that's trying to get into, as you're going past a road and he's trying to get a space, instead of blocking him off like everyone else, stopping and letting him come out. Everybody did that, we'd change the world. That's the response to despair. And also, energy follows thought. So if we're thinking negative thoughts, we bring negative energy. If we put our mind on positive thoughts, then we draw the energy of positive goodness and goodwill, and love into the world. And that's what religion is supposed to really be about. Right? Comes from ligar, binding ourselves. The word to bind in Latin. We're supposed to be binding ourselves to that which is infinite and eternal. Binding ourselves to God's divine attributes. And therefore becoming instruments, vehicles for those attributes, for that essential goodness to pour into the world, both through ourselves as instruments and vessels for God's energy, and also through our positive actions and words that we perform in the world. And when I think of all the people, despite all the problems, that are trying to do good, especially in the most difficult places, that brings me hope. Maybe this is a good place to end. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.